What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Shoehorn podcast. I'm your host, Noah Gebert. We're just kind of going over the additional moves that the Colts made today, a couple transactions that they made after getting down to that initial 53-man roster yesterday. So that was mainly what was going on in Colts world today, so that's what we're going to be talking about. Yesterday, I went over on the show my initial reactions, kind of breaking down position by position on what the Colts 53-man roster is looking like at the moment, kind of giving my thoughts on the players they kept, the players they let go. So if you need any information and want any more information about what I was saying back then, go back and watch yesterday's show. But if you have any more questions about just the 53-man roster in general, I'm happy to talk about them tonight as well. So yeah, throw in your chat just initial thoughts on the 53-man roster in general. Thoughts on the waiver moves today, the practice squad moves today, Ballard press conference we're going to hit on. Yeah, so any questions you guys have, anything you guys want to chat about, I'll just throw that in the chat there. We'll talk about it for sure. John Gilbert in the chat. So yeah, we were asking about which player you're most excited to see back on the practice squad. We had that initial list of 11. I'm just going to go through it. I'll go ahead and throw up. So I'm just kind of manually keeping track of the depth chart. And so I just threw all the players and how they're looking and how the 53-man roster kind of breaks down position by position, specifically like even roles within the positions. And then the 11-man, or yeah, I guess 11-man at this point, practice squad that they've got right here. So I'll throw that up there. All right. But yeah, James Bean, Evan Hull, I was just going to kind of the guys that you're hoping that made it through waivers and you got back on the practice squad. So yeah, James Bean and Evan Hull, I would say were the big ones. And then the kind of the next tier of that would be Jalen Simpson, the 5th round corner. There was definitely a lot of talk going on yesterday after initial wave of roster cuts about how fans were disappointed about cutting the 5th round corner, the 6th round corner, and a 7th round defensive tackle. Chris Ballard kind of hinted at that during his press conference today. He kind of addressed that when you're making as many picks as they do with their trade down kind of strategy they have, especially in the later rounds where they're accumulating all these draft picks and all these late round picks. Sometimes, I mean, you're picking guys that need a little bit more development. And when you're having that many rookies taking up spots on the roster, not all of them are going to be able to make that final 53 when you've got that many on the 90. So it does make sense a little bit that they're cutting down from the large amount of rookies that they had. They came in with 9 draft picks. Can't always expect to keep all 9. But good to see that they got Jalen Simpson back, at least one of those on the practice squad. Micah Abraham, another corner, not announced on the practice squad, so it's unclear whether he'll be back. He might be getting some interest elsewhere around the league, so maybe he's kind of weighing his options, so they weren't able to announce it today. So we'll kind of see monitoring throughout the week if he's somebody they bring back. Sean Conkright in the chat. Good to see you, Sean. This is my 4th episode of the Shoehorn podcast. Sean's already become a regular in the chat here. It's good to see you, buddy. John saying he missed the whole announcement. Yeah, so I guess it was kind of coming out, leaking out on Twitter. Joel A. Erickson and Tom Pelissero, I believe, were the first on that to kind of break the Evan Hull was signing back with the practice squad. Let me try to pull that. It is up on Colts.com. They had announced it officially when they announced their 11-man practice squad. They just kind of announced that all as one lump sum on Colts.com. They kind of put that out, and they put that out on their socials that they signed those 11 guys. So yeah, Evan Hull was just kind of included in that original dump of those 11 guys that they brought back. Sarah back in the chat, another regular 4 episodes in. Good to see you, Sarah. Yeah, she's saying Jason Bean, Evan Hull, and she brings up Laquan Treadwell as guys that she's happy about having back on the practice squad. Yeah, Treadwell is kind of a guy that I thought might have some interest throughout the league somewhere else. He's a vested veteran, so he wasn't subject to waivers like some of these other young guys. So he was free to sign wherever at any point without going through waivers. Chose to come back to the Colts practice squad. The Colts liked him enough, and he kind of showed what he could do throughout the preseason. I think that's kind of the ideal guy that they're looking for on the practice squad at receiver. DJ Montgomery, another guy that they brought back on the practice squad at receiver. It's kind of this veteran guy, steady guy. kind of a guy you can trust, not really somebody who needs to develop more. They just kind of are what they are at this point, and you're ready to throw them in a pinch. You saw last year, Juwan Winfrey, DJ Montgomery, Tyree Cleveland, these kind of guys that have been around the league a little bit, getting some time on the practice squad and getting kind of elevated as needed. And Laquan Treadwell kind of fits that bill. Gotcha. Yeah, John. Yeah, some things gets buried in the X feed. Yeah, today was a big news day, man. So like, if you're following along, trying to keep up with everything on X, and you kind of step away for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and you're not kind of watching that, then yeah, there gets a whole lot of things that keep coming through, and yeah, things get buried really easily for sure. Yeah, happy Treadwell came back. Yeah, it's kind of cool seeing like a former first round pick who's kind of had gone through ups and downs throughout the league and been through so many different teams, and then coming and performing here in the preseason, and really the fans kind of warming up to him, and then just getting that opportunity to stay on the practice squad. So that's good to see. Yeah, and then Sarah brings back. So she brings up two of the corners that they ended up keeping, in Chris Lamons and Jalen Simpson. They also brought back Amir Speed at corner too. So the Colts, I guess we could start there, because yeah, this is where they made most of their moves, is in the cornerback room. So Samuel Womack III was their one waiver claim that they made today. Samuel Womack was waived from San Francisco. The Colts were awarded him. He was the one claim that they put in. He was the one claim that they were awarded. And to make room for him, they waived Darrell Baker Jr. So yesterday, yeah, I was talking about Darrell Baker. Sarah's glad to see Darrell Baker Jr. gone. But yeah, I thought he was kind of a guy who he was a liability at points last season. So maybe that trust is just kind of too far gone for Gus Bradley and the coaching staff. But I thought this summer he kind of proved that maybe he could leave that behind him, and he was pretty steady. And I think that he had a little bit of trust. But yeah, ultimately they went with a guy they found on the waiver wire in Womack, who's a guy that in 2022, when he was coming out, the Colts showed a lot of interest in the draft. Chris Ballard talked about how they liked him in the draft coming out, and were kind of monitoring his situation. But yeah, so they still, with the waiving of Darrell Baker, they still are at 5 corners. So I thought that was number was a little bit low. I was expecting 6 on the roster, but it kind of makes sense when you keep 5 that you bring back 3 guys on the practice squad. So they've got Chris Lamons, who is essentially their backup nickel, I guess, depending on what they're going to end up doing with Samuel Womack. And then Jalen Simpson, the rookie that needs a little bit more development. I feel like of the 3 corners that are on the practice squad, he's the least likely to be called up into game action, but good to keep him around just for his development. And then Amir Speed, who can play some outside corner, but is mostly going to be a special teams guy if they need to bring him up. Sean's talking about the defensive tackle we signed from the Texans to the practice squad not long ago. Yeah, so that's McTelvin Agim. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it, but that is who that is. McTelvin Agim was actually on the roster for the initial 53 for the Colts last year. So on cut day, he initially made the final 53-man roster. And then when the waiver claims came through the next day, the Colts claimed Isaiah Land off of waivers from Dallas and ended up waiving McTelvin Agim there. So I feel like he was a guy that I think the Colts were hoping they could sneak through after that initial wave of all those roster cuts last year. He ends up getting claimed and bounced around a little bit, but they're glad to have him back. And when you've got 2 guys that you cut that you were maybe hoping to bring back on the practice squad in 7th round pick Jonah Laulu and Eric Johnson, those aren't options anymore since they were claimed on waivers. Laulu by the Raiders, Eric Johnson, I think, by the Patriots. So yeah, those guys aren't options on the practice squad anymore for you at defensive tackle, so they went out and grabbed a familiar face. All right. Frank in the chat showing some Colts support. Appreciate you, Frank. Richie back in the chat asking about Xavier Scott. Yeah, so Xavier Scott is kind of a guy that I expected the Colts to bring back on the practice squad. And again, they're at 11 spots out of, I guess, 17 is their total, since they're keeping Marcel Dabo, who has that roster exemption, being the international player, which I think this is the final year he has that. So essentially, they're keeping 17 with Dabo on there. So at 11, you've got 6 more spots left. Maybe Xavier Scott's a guy who's kind of weighing his options a little bit. Maybe the Colts are just willing to move on and feel satisfied with the depth they have, since they were able to bring Hull back on the practice squad. So tough to say right now, but whether Xavier Scott gets signed to the practice squad later this week, if he's still available, I wouldn't be surprised sometime later in the season. Maybe some injuries happen, and he happens to be the face that they bring back on the practice squad later throughout the season. I wouldn't give up on Xavier Scott just yet. We'll kind of see what's in store for him. Yeah, and Frank with the support. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. But yeah, let's we talked about Samuel Womack. My buddy Zach Hicks over at horseshoehuddle.com put up a film piece on him instantly. Like as soon as it was reported that the Colts had put in a waiver claim for Samuel Womack, he put on the film, and he got in there, and he was really kind of digging into his game and kind of what he's going to bring the Colts and what Colts fans should expect. So yeah, so definitely go to horseshoehuddle.com, check out that piece that Zach wrote. But yeah, he was talking about him bringing upside to special teams, being kind of that ball skills type corner that the Colts like. Frame kind of like Kenny Moore in the sense that he's 5'9", 5'10", I think is what he measured at, but freakishly long wingspan. So yeah, Kenny Moore is one of those guys that also is a smaller in height, but has that long wingspan that kind of makes him that outlier. And that those long arms kind of make up for what he lacks in height. Kind of going through Samuel Womack's career, just pulled up where he's played, just his snap counts. Looks like last year most of his defensive snaps were outside, but in 2022, his rookie season had some. He split it pretty evenly, being inside in the slot and outside at corner. So he has experience at both. Not a ton. Was primarily a special teams guy both of those 2 years. Getting reps on all 4 of those core special teams units: punt return, punt coverage, kick return, kick coverage. So yeah, he's likely to be the outside gunner on all those coverage units, with Ashton Dulin being on the other side, since they brought Ashton Dulin back. So yeah, it's not yet clear whether that's mostly a special teams claim that they made on waivers for Womack, or if they kind of expect him to get in the mix a little bit and shuffle it up with actual defensive snaps at corner. But yeah, we'll kind of see how the season goes on. But either way, you've got depth at corner with somebody who can play inside and outside, and Darrell Baker was kind of a guy who could only play outside. So if you're going with a 5th corner, better to have somebody that's a little more versatile like that. Yeah, Sarah Sage's got a Niners fan who likes Womack, was disappointed. Yeah, I think that's a good sign. So we'll talk about how the Colts or in the past have made a lot of waiver claims, and a lot of their guys aren't really the guys that get claimed. I think it's a good sign that they only felt the need to go after one guy on waivers in Womack, and then 2 of the guys that they were hoping to bring back got snatched up. So that's kind of a good sign. Womack individually, I don't know a whole bunch of Niner fans. I haven't been in a lot of discussion with him, but yeah, I think Samuel Womack's pretty, like, nobody hates on the guy. He's just a guy who works hard on special teams. It's kind of hard to have a problem with a guy like that on your roster. Wyatt Law in the chat. Good to see you, Wyatt. Asking what Bean's long-term Colts future might be. And if he can play winning NFL football. And I think that's a question the Colts are trying to figure out. But that practice squad spot to them, I think they're showing that they're willing to take the chance on that and see if that's something that he can end up doing. Yeah, really, I think unexpected preseason performance for them, for Jason Bean. And I don't think the Colts were really expecting him to show out in the way that he did. Initially bringing him on as kind of this quarterback receiver hybrid to play both positions. And then as soon as he started taking snaps at quarterback, they just left him there, and he really didn't get any run at wide receiver. So they just liked what they saw from the day that he came in. In terms of his Colts future, you're looking at, it depends on kind of what that emergency quarterback rule ends up being next year after they go through the owner meetings. But Sam Ellinger is in a contract year and is probably outplayed a second contract with the Colts. I don't think it's likely that he's coming back for the Colts after this season. Joe Flacco, not going to be around longer, so you've kind of got to figure out what your backup quarterback situation is. And even after that, you got to figure out what your third string situation is, which I think is the more likely option for Jason Bean. So yeah, if he's impressing on the practice squad this season, I think it's a possibility that he ends up on the roster or on the 53-man roster next year as the third quarterback. Richie in the chat asking if they're going to bring anyone back at safety. You would kind of think that if they were going to do that, it would be in this initial waiver, like this round, the initial waiver claims that came in, just because that's when the majority of them are cut and they're available. But I don't know if I'd expect a move. I mean, roster's going to be fluid all the way throughout. What we have 10 more days until the opening game. So there's a chance that somebody becomes available, or they're still evaluating some of those guys on the wire that they're going to go after. I think more than likely you're going to see a veteran type guy join on the practice squad at safety, and can be a guy that they call up at certain points throughout the year, and kind of get their evaluation done that way, rather than replacing somebody on the active roster there. Eric in the chat says he's hoping and praying that Nick Cross balls out this year. We need a solid guy at safety that can mentor Cross and bring out the best in him. Just concerned about the secondary. Super stoked about Latu. Dude's a machine. Yeah, so Nick Cross is kind of in his do or die year. Ballard in his press conference was defending him today, talking about how young he was when he got drafted, which is still true. He's 22 years old. He's one of the youngest players on the team still to this point. So I think they're being patient with the development there, a little bit more patient than the fan base has been this preseason. But yeah, a guy that can mentor him in the secondary, I think you kind of have those guys in Julian Blackmon and Kenny Moore. And obviously Kenny Moore is going to be here for the long term. It depends on whether or not Julian Blackmon's going to be here for the long term. But I do think if you're pairing up a guy with Nick Cross to help him develop, I think Julian Blackmon's an excellent guy to pair up at safety. Maybe they need a more veteran voice, just a secondary guy, a veteran back in the safety room that could be like an additional set of eyes and an additional sounding board for Cross and his development. So maybe that's someone that they go after. But I do kind of like their situation in terms of how they plan to bring Nick Cross along. Ballard in his presser was talking about these young guys in the secondary and how they need to play to get better, which I think is true. So if you're hoping on Nick Cross's development, you want him to be in the starting lineup. If you're just hoping for the best possible secondary you can get, which I think is super fair as a Colts fan, then you're maybe hoping for an outside addition. But if you're wanting Nick Cross to develop, I think getting him playing time beside Kenny Moore, beside Julian Blackmon is the move to go. Talking about Latu, Ballard brought him up in his presser too. I can't remember who asked the question, but he was talking about the impact that Latu's going to have and how he was able to have the camp that he had, where he was just productive throughout the beginning, middle, and end. Didn't really have that rookie wall that he hit. And Ballard was talking about how impressed he is with his instincts, his ability to just keep his eye on the quarterback at all times throughout his rushes, which he said was super impressive. He was asked about the kind of the playing time or the situational role that Latu will have. And I don't think he was in the business of giving anything away, and ultimately it'll be up to the coaches. But Ballard was just kind of smiling during the question and nodding and saying he'll play. So he's going to get his snaps for sure. Yeah, Wyatt talking about Ballard raving about Bean at his presser today. Yeah, so Bean went to Kansas. I think Jason Bean got a little bit lucky in the sense that Ballard was at all those Kansas games to watch his son play, or to just be there to support his son, since his son is a quarterback on the Kansas football team as well. So either Jason Bean was lucky or Chris Ballard was lucky that he got to see Jason Bean in person and kind of see what he can do. And he said his skill set kind of fits the offense that they want to run. So really, I guess if you're looking at next year and you're looking at Joe Flacco being gone and you're looking at Sam Ehlinger being gone, Jason Bean is kind of a guy that can run the Colts offense, the Anthony Richardson Colts offense. We've got some lights flashing in here. All right. But yeah, if you're looking at a guy who can run the offense, I think a lot of people are in two different camps when it comes to the backup quarterback. Either you want a guy who can go in and win a few games at whatever cost, or you want a guy who's similar to your starting quarterback who can run the same kind of offense so that you can just kind of pick up where you left off. And the offense might not be as good as it was, but you're at least kind of running the same kind of concepts. So I think Bean is a guy like that. Richard's asking about any safeties I'd like to see signed to the practice squad. I would love to sit here and tell you that I have a list of guys that I've evaluated that I like to see come to the practice squad. I don't really have a lot of info on the guys that have been waived and whether they've been claimed or not. Just kind of being glued to the Colts news today. So I would kind of have to go through the list of who's been cut, who's been claimed, who's not been claimed. If you go through initially Zach Hicks, I'm going to shout out another Zach Hicks article that's on horseshoehuddle.com. He kind of went through before the waiver claims were announced today, a couple guys that he'd like to have signed. So I'll just pull that up. We can go over some of his names. I'm not too ashamed to do that. Yeah, so I'm just going to name off some names. If you guys already know in the chat, you can even tell me if these guys have been picked up somewhere else. So Lewis Cine of the Minnesota Vikings, I do believe, landed in New York. I don't know if he's on the Jets practice squad or if he's on their active roster. Zach did mention him in the article, but I believe he's off the table at this point. Matthew Jackson, safety from the Tennessee Titans, is another guy that he brought up. I'm not 100% sure if he's been claimed anywhere else, but I do trust Zach's player evaluations a little bit more than my own. Gotcha. I don't see any information on Matthew Jackson, so he might be a guy that's still available to bring back onto the practice squad, or he might be on the Titans practice squad at this point. I'm not 100% sure. Gosh, Wyatt's asking about current practice squatters that's most likely to get poached by another team this year. Yeah, and that's a good question. There's definitely some guys. I was a little bit worried going through that Evan Hull would be a guy that kind of gets poached up or snatched up. I guess it depends. So if you are on the practice squad and a team approaches you to sign you, most of the time you're going to say yes. Just to get an opportunity to be on an NFL roster instead of a practice squad. Pays certainly a lot better in that situation. But sometimes teams are in good communication with their practice squad guys, and they kind of have that future plan for them laid out. So Evan Hull could be a guy that the Colts have been super open with about what their plans are for the future. And Evan Hull might be kind of digging that and not really want to take any opportunities elsewhere. But running back's always a position that's going to have a lot of attrition throughout the year. I'm going to get a lot of injuries throughout the league. I wouldn't be surprised if after a couple weeks, maybe a team or two has some injuries in their running back room and they need some reinforcements. I think Evan Hull could be a guy that gets snagged there. So there are 6 spots left. Is there anybody else throughout the roster after the initial wave of roster cuts? I know earlier we brought up Micah Abraham and how he hasn't been announced to be on the roster. We talked about, I think Richie brought up Xavier Scott, asking about him. Is there anybody else that have been cut that you guys wish had been brought back to the practice squad at this point, other than guys that have been claimed? Yeah, Sarah's talking about Ronnie Harrison. Yeah, was in that initial wave of cuts that happened before the deadline. So he was cut, I believe, on Friday or Saturday of last week. And not even a guy that had to go through waivers since he was a vested veteran. So yeah, Ronnie Harrison. I mean, especially if you're looking at the safety room right now, Nick Cross, Rodney Thomas, Julian Blackman, Trevor Denbo. and no other safeties on the practice squad. I mean, you've got Marcel Dabo, but I'm not sure they're going to be in a situation where they want Marcel Dabo playing any defensive snaps. So Ronnie Harrison, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a guy that they brought back. But being in that initial wave of cuts kind of indicates to me that they're ready to move on. But yeah, I think definitely kind of fits the bill for an emergency call-up guy that you might need to play some snaps on the defensive side of the ball. Gotcha. Richard in the chat talking about the safeties, asking if I think it's best that Cross plays strong safety and Julian plays free safety. He thought Cross looked great at strong safety during the preseason. Yeah, I think the good situation that they have is they've kind of forced themselves to cross-train both of these guys to play both safety spots. I think ultimately you would want Julian Blackmon to be kind of your last line of defense at free safety. Just because I think if there's a mistake or if there's a miscommunication because of Nick Cross's inexperience or his age, that you'd rather him be closer to the box when that miscommunication happens. Maybe he's not really in the spot or in the right spot to cover a flat route or a curl route. But if you've got that miscommunication on the back end and you're running a cover 3 and he's kind of your deep middle guy, and you've got some receivers running post routes and he's miscommunicating, he's paying too close of attention to another receiver, then that's goes from a 10-yard mistake to maybe a 40-yard mistake. So you'd like to avoid those miscommunication errors as much as you can and kind of give Cross the freedom to not be worried so much about making mistakes and being able to play fast. So yeah, I think ideally you have the situation that you have where you can line them up at either spot right now. And you kind of keep the offense guessing with the personnel that you have on the field. So the quarterback doesn't immediately come out and say 32's playing deep and 20's playing up in the box. And that's kind of what their role is going to be. And that's how the drops are going to go once I snap it. But yeah, I think more often than not, I would prefer personally to have Julian Blackmon taking that deep responsibility rather than the responsibility closer to the line of scrimmage. Yeah, Wyatt and Sarah talking about Marcel Dabo. Yeah, so I was trying to get some clarity on this myself this year because he was on the offseason roster, this 90-man roster. They essentially could keep 91 because they had him. Yeah, Wyatt's asking. They're not mandated to keep him, to keep Marcel Dabo on the roster, but he is the only person that they can keep on the roster and have something extra of. So I think you've already kind of put these 2 years into him. This is his third year. You've put in that development into him. I don't think you're going to give up at that point as long as he's still got that exemption. They're not mandated to keep him on the roster, but if they keep him, they're allowed to have 17 practice squad players. So maybe you get a little bit more flexible with the players that you're getting reps. You get a little bit more people to have some rest throughout the grind of the regular season. So I think it's wise to keep him around. And then, I mean, maybe in year 3, you've kind of seen the development that he's going to have, and it's not going to go much further than it already has. But yeah, I mean, you're kind of getting a free roster spot to play with and a free player you're going to have. Whether he's going to make it onto the active roster at any point or not, I think is kind of besides the point for them. And they're kind of just happy to keep him around on the practice squad. Yeah. So he's a practice dummy. A very highly paid practice dummy. And I think that's definitely a harsh way to put it. But yeah, I mean, I don't foresee him making the active roster next year, just because he's never kind of cracked into like the top 5 safeties that they've ever had on their 90-man roster. So even when you had Ronnie Harrison on the roster before he was cut, he was still behind him. So he was at best safety number 6. I'm trying to even remember who was still on the roster at this point that was waived that was ahead of him. But yeah, he's always kind of been in that final rotation through practices in the preseason. He was always playing in the fourth quarter of these preseason games. So yeah, I'm not sure he's going to ever crack the active roster, but yeah, I mean, it's worth keeping him around as long as you've got that exemption from the NFL for him. Anyone else have any comments from that Ballard made throughout his press conference today that kind of caught you off guard? He talked about Matt Gay. I think it was Kevin Bowen that was talking about Matt Gay, kind of asking if Ballard was worried about him at all. Uh, yeah, he just kind of straight up defended him, said no, he's a great kicker, he's not worried. Which I think you're never gonna. It's a bad sign if a reporter asks you that and you say, yeah, we're not sure at the kicker position. So I don't know really what they're expecting with that question. I don't think you're going to get Chris Ballard in a gotcha moment where he's kind of shooting down at one of his guys. So whether Chris Ballard is monitoring the situation or not, I think Ballard did make the right call in saying, yeah, he's fully behind Matt Gay. My opinion on Womack, Richard. Yeah, so the only waiver claim they made was in the cornerback room. So and then they brought 3 back on the practice squad. I like the Womack move. I think, actually higher on Darrell Baker than a lot of the fans were. Just because I think when you're kind of thrust into the position that he was, you're going to get burnt a few times, and it happened. So I think that he had the opportunity to recover. I don't think that was forever going to be his story in the NFL, is this guy that gets burnt. So I was a little higher on Darrell Baker, but I was okay with them moving on from Baker, because Baker's not a guy who plays a ton of special teams. He was getting some run in the preseason at the gunner position, taking some snaps there, but I think they were kind of rotating everybody there. But during the regular season, I don't think Baker was going to be a guy that was going to make an impact or kind of be this core starter on special teams. So it was smart to get a guy like Womack who can be that and has been that in the past. And then, when you're keeping 5 corners instead of 6, you kind of want your 5th or 6th corner to be a guy who can play inside or outside. Baker was a guy who played outside, and I don't think he's really taken any snaps at any point in his career in the slot. And Womack's a guy who has experience doing both. So I think that was a good move for just the versatility on the back end of your secondary. And then for special teams. Sarah saying, he talked about A.D. Mitchell. Yeah, he was talking about A.D. Mitchell. He was talking about Alec Pierce. I think he got asked about them in that same question, kind of his opinion on how those two turned out. He was talking about how he likes A.D. Mitchell. I know he has some affection for him, but he kind of went off about Alec Pierce and how he said he had one of the best camps of anybody on the team. So he's really talking up this wide receiver room. I think he's proud of kind of the group that he's been able to put together. I like the receiver room too. Yeah, Richard talking about. So this was on Twitter a lot. Everybody was talking about the James Boyd asking if he was on the hot seat. So I'm not sure if it was. I think it was actually Kevin Bowen who asked him if he was on the hot seat, and then James Boyd followed up with, "Can you explain why you're the right man for the job?" So they kind of tag team Ballard there, getting him on those tough questions. I don't really know what kind of answer you're expecting, but I guess they're writing stories too. They're writing their articles, so they're going to get the quotes that they need for that. I don't think you were ever going to get anything super interesting out of him. Wyatt, bringing up one of the quotes, talking about how. I mean, I'm not going to be able to remember the quote word for word, but just paraphrasing, he's like, you got to have something to believe in. The way he's done things, the way he believes in them, and if it gets him fired, then so be it. Which, I mean, that's yet to be seen if that's going to get him fired or not. Ultimately, if he does get fired, it will be his convictions that did it. But I don't think that he is on the hot seat at this point. Jim Irsay just week 2 or week 1? I don't remember which week of the preseason it was, but calling him a blue chip GM. I don't think he's on the hot seat. And I think the question was never really going to get a stunning answer. Rob asking who's throwing more touchdowns, Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco. I'll tell you right now, Rob, if Joe Flacco throws more interceptions than Anthony Richardson, then that's Ballard's job's gone. All right, guys. Hey, I appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. I know we got started a little bit later. It did seem like 7:00. We had quite a few people in here popping around in the chat, so maybe that's something we're going to do going forward. But this was episode 4 or 5 of the show, so I'm still kind of learning where we're going to be, what the format's going to be. I kind of like just coming in and chatting it up with you guys and kind of answering questions to whatever knowledge I have, or if I just don't know, I'll straight up tell you guys I don't know. So yeah, I've kind of liked this format. Like you guys coming in the chat, just wanted to say thanks again. I appreciate you guys doing that, because all these other the podcast, the Horseshoe Huddle podcast on this show, Andrew and Drake do a great job kind of outlining these points that they want to hit, and they're super efficient in how they go through it, and they're still kind of getting you guys involved with the comments that you've got. But I'm just coming in. I've got like 3 things that maybe we'll bring up, but other than that, I just kind of want to talk to you guys and talk about what you guys want to talk about. It's easier for me on the planning side of things, and I think it's just a little bit more fun. So yeah, I appreciate you guys. Yeah, I enjoy the format too. I love talking to you guys. Love getting the info from you, getting your guys' thoughts and kind of sharing mine. Rob Murphy asking who has more sacks, Pay or Latu. And that's a good question. I think we kind of are expecting, I think, largely a double-digit sack performance from Latu, or at least something close to that. So maybe I would go like 9.5 for Latu and maybe 8 for Quiddy Pay. I'm not gonna go ahead and project a rookie to keep 11 or get 11 or 12 sacks, but we'll have him just shy of 10 with 9.5. But yeah, I'd say Pay would probably hover around that 8 sack mark. But sacks are not always super predictable. Yeah, I think that's gonna be it. Tomorrow, 7, the Horseshoe Huddle podcast with Andrew and Drake that I was talking about will be back on this channel. Definitely the flagship program of this channel. So come check those guys out at 7, and then I will be back Friday, probably 6. But we'll see. I'll definitely keep you guys updated. We'll keep you guys updated on Facebook. We'll keep you guys updated on the X account. That's at Colts on _SI on X. Or you can follow me at Noah Gebert on X. I'll definitely keep you guys updated with the start times if we ever need to make a change on 6, 7, or later or whatever. But yeah, keep up with us there. Keep up with us at coltsonsi.com. That's horseshoehuddle.com for all our Colts coverage. Me and all the boys have been kind of digging in deep for all the news coverage that's been coming out, and as we're gearing up for our regular season action, we're getting into the swing of things. So yeah, but I appreciate you guys. I will see you guys on Friday. You guys have a good night.